Hi, Untimely Meditations and Javier. How you guys doing? Oh boy. Um, what I'd like to do today is to really sort of take a deep dive into what we use as criteria, and we're sort of left with a default, if you will. Is sort of like, well, we've got this thing that's called high horology, but it was sort of, I don't think any collectors were involved, and I think it was mainly based on a lot of different kinds of business decisions, and I want to talk about that for a second. Hey, Dominic, how you doing? And I think the decisions that it was made on are good ones in terms of the business. And because good business decisions were made doesn't mean that's bad for us because we're collectors. We're not expected to have a lot of sense, but I suppose we should have some. And by that, I mean we're dependent on these companies to stay in business to make watches that we'd like to have. Now, on the other hand, there's um, there's always a sort of a split between cutting corners and increasing profits or spending more money on we'll say advertising and marketing than you spend on R&D and developing things. Let me give you an example. I was talking see who was it? Steve Force of Gerbil and Force, and I'd always wanted to have a Remontoy Galate. And the one in particular that I liked was the one by F.P. Jorn. The one by Groenfeld also was quite nice, and I didn't realize that Gerber and Frosty had one. And so I asked him. I said, that's a really interesting, I think brilliant, as a matter of fact, um, what do we call it, a device complication for maintaining um, constant force. Okay. In other words, making your mechanical watch work as well as possible for a mechanical watch. And he said, yeah, but it's really difficult. And so people don't do it. It was like, oh, okay. Um, Hi, Andrew. Hi, J Man. And I, I, I wore this watch. This is sort of another example of a watch with a double hairspring. Hi, Lee. And the thing with the double hairspring, almost as soon as I got it, I was trying to find out how come they weren't making too many more. And I heard that apparently putting them in where you have these two rotating balances going in opposite directions, or the springs for them, I should say, the hairsprings are. And this is to keep the balance wheel shaft straight, and it works like airplane propellers. When I used to fly, we used to have to hold down on one of the rudders to offset the torque. And if somebody with twin engines, they could have them going in different directions, and so the torque of each one would offset it. Well, this is the way the complication in the H. Moser Henry double hairspring works, and it does work, and it keeps excellent time. And they said it just costs too much. It's just too expensive to do. Now, on the other hand, uh, when you take a look at the amount that's spent on marketing and marketing related activities that we pay for when we buy a watch, uh, it's a lot. And so I'm thinking, well, what if we said, look, I tell you what, uh, you all you have to sell us on is that it's got a really good functioning complication. All right, or the way it's set up, we did something to it so that it works really well. All right, any number of things that could be from. This morning, I had on my Harboring 2, and Harboring 2, this watch, this Felix, has incredibly keeps incredibly good time. I've had it for years, never had it serviced, and it still has great time. And I think it had to do with the way that it was built. And Richard Harboring and his wife Maria, um, they only put out a few hundred watches a year, and they don't charge that much for them, around $4,000 to $5,000, something along those lines. And so something's going on. I don't know if they spend a dime on marketing and advertising. They may have a little, maybe a web page, and that's about it. But these are some of the things, and so the high horology, when you see it and when we talk about it, you hear about things like finishing, which is more of a way things look rather than the way things work kind of thing. So this is the kind of thing I thought, well, let's set up some kind of criteria and see if we can figure out a way. Now, at the same time, and I think this was an important thing that they did, the quartz watches just literally destroyed most of the businesses because they were so good and they were so cheap. And so they had to come up with something, and so this is what they called high horology. And when you look at who started it, um, it was started in sort of in different fits and grasps. And so I thought, well, let's come up with like we'll have a number of things we can talk about. Hey, J man, the generic consumer is probably more willing to shell out for stuff like perpetual calendars or flyback chronos than constant force complication that require horological knowledge to appreciate. Maybe. I mean, again, now that's a marketing argument you're giving me, and you're saying, well, this is important because people will buy it. Okay. Uh, Things like perpetual calendars are not easy. I mean, these are, and I don't know to what extent they would. The perpetual calendar. I got my iPhone, but that's hooked up that I can connect up to an atomic clock and a granite mountain somewhere for that. Um, so I think that it, I don't know if there's a way to do it. In other words, I don't know if there's a way. And J man, you got a point in insofar as saying we're not going to make a bunch of fancy watches that nobody wants. Um, if the criteria are in some kind of excellence, if you can say, well, this watch is really accurate. Um, this one is really accurate and has been for years, and I think it's because of wonderfully good craftsmanship. And like I said, they don't make too many of these. They don't charge a great deal, but they're not putting their money into great finishing. This, on the other hand, has keeps fabulous time, and in part one of the reasons is that they have the double hairsprings. However, the double hairsprings cost so much to produce, and the watch wasn't selling that well anyway because I think J Man does have a point. Like, who cares? I'd rather have something like a perpetual calendar or something like that. Um, by the way, too, it's sort of interesting that you mentioned perpetual calendars because this company, H. Moser, I think makes one of the best perpetual calendars out there. Hi, DeMarco and least time tuna. There must be a lot said for a simple watch that is made impeccably well. I agree. Um, this is what I was thinking is that you have that. This is one of the ironies and perhaps one of the paradoxes of high horology. You take a Patek Philippe Calatrava. I'll just, to make it simple, I'll say from 2008, before they started putting silicon in them. And that watch, it was gold, uh, had, very, very good mechanics inside of it. I had an older one. I had an older Calatrava. That thing was fantastic. I sold it because it was too small and I wasn't wearing it very much. But boy, was it an excellent watch. Now I'm getting sort of, I wonder about things like, well, putting in silicon into a watch. I know that that was one of the reasons, I think, that um, Patek Philippe had to sort of give themselves their own seal of approval, because I don't think that the Geneva seal was willing to do that, if under those circumstances, because of that. Does that mean silicon is bad? No, but quartz wasn't bad either. I mean, these are probably the great majority of watches that people wear have quartz movements in it, because you get a good watch. And now they're moving to smart watches. I don't know what the amount of percentage that smart watches are over quartz or over mechanical watches. One of the things that's sort of interesting, one of the most um, what we would call, I guess, environmentally good things about mechanical watches is that they don't use any batteries that'll mess up the environment or anything like that. But anyway, going back to that, I think that we really need to look at these things and decide, where the values. And I don't know. Hey, Mark J, how you doing? Um, let's see. Loose tooth, jumping seconds is something interesting, but not to my taste. Okay. Um, jumping seconds are part of quartz watches. I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of things that aren't. I don't think I have a. I don't own a watch with jumping seconds, but I'd like to. A mechanical watch. So you don't have to like them. Some people do. They used to call them doctor's watches for taking pulses, because they could catch them on the pulse. Yeah, Lee pointed that out too. Because something had a reason. Um, at one time, I I don't know. I think they probably have. There's probably a smartwatch that doctors have, and they can plug it into something, put a cuff on someone, and know their medical history. Hey Tim, how you doing? Hi Jose. Oh, how are things in Brazil? Yeah, one of the things. This is another funny thing about one of the reasons I like the H Moser perpetual calendar. It's very easy to reset. I mean, you think about it, a perpetual calendar has got to be going all the time. How do what if you lose 15 years in there or something? I don't know how well, I'm not sure why it works well, but it does. Hey, Stephen, and the Sound Business One company had the highest percentage of its products cost in advertising and the lowest in the work. Professionals hated them, but they were very profitable. Yep, Stephen, I think you hit the nail on the head. Well, see, the thing is that I suppose there can be, lots of different collectors. And the notion of high horology, there's this sort of this combined notion that came out of the foundation of high horology, which was in turn founded by Audemars Piguet, who else? Tag Heuer, and then uh, the Richemont group. Well, all of those things have a very clear ring to it. Of these are purely for business purposes, But one of the things that they did, they said, look, you guys, at least we got to think about this. One of the things they put in there, for example, were precious metals. And so you should have a watch that's made of gold or silver, not silver, but platinum or some other precious metal. Well, they didn't realize when they made that rule, if you will, that the price of gold was just going to go mad. They found it in 2005. In 2005, the price of gold was around $200 an ounce, and now it is $2,000 an ounce. And with the latest thing with inflation, it'll probably go up more. So, I mean, yes, there was a purpose, I suppose, to keep out, I don't know who, but somebody with a stainless steel case. But there are stainless steel cases and stainless steel cases. There's different grades of steel, and there's certainly different grades of craftsmanship that goes into to a case, whether it's made out of steel or anything else. Hi, Javi. Hi, Andrew. Let's see what's up. JLC Geophysics, True Seconds is a watch. I wish they still made. Andrew, I'm with you on that. This is, see, one of the things that you wonder how decisions are made. So here you have a Jaeger-LeCoultre, the geophysics line, right? And then you have the owners are Richemont. A friend of mine who was a German watchmaker, a very good one. Matter of fact, he was one of the Grand Prix judges. Was telling me when we first met, everything was all longa. He just loved all longa, and recommended I get all longa. And I didn't disagree with him, by the way. I just couldn't afford it at the time. And then a couple of years later, he said something's happened to him. And they were bought by the Richemont Group. Now, the Richemont Group is, they want a return on their investment. And, that to me, that's a very tricky kind of thing to do. Probably beside Rolex, Swatch is probably making, tons and tons of money off of watches that are well under $1,000. I was even $500 is where they gain most of their profits. And so there's these kinds of things, and so we're really talking about a subgroup or a sub level of watches that we want very good ones for, and we got to figure out two things. One, what is it that we want? And two, how do we afford them? And then, well, actually, a third thing is that how can watchmakers afford to make and sell them? Because there's a lot that goes into creating a mechanical watch, a prototype, and then you have to do all of these other kinds of things to make a watch happen. And that's why when you see standard size cases, it's because they can use the same case and the base plate and a few other things. And so you end up with all these different looking watches, but they all have the same movement, the same other kinds of basic elements to them. One company I like a lot that doesn't seem to be, I don't know, for some reason, and the sense I have is that they're always struggling. And this is Moritz Grossmann. And the reason I say that is that they've never been seen, I don't think, at the same level, perhaps, as Alonga. They're a German company on Glashütte, but they're seen as, I don't know what. There's and their watches, they make really wonderful watches, but they only have one or two. I think they have a very few base movements, and they're not really putting into a lot of different new movements. Before Marco Lang left Langenheim, look at the number of movements he made. I mean, it was like, what are you doing this weekend? I think I'll put another movement out. Since he left, I don't know if they've had any new movements other than the UWD, what is it, 33.2. And they did what they did is that they took the 33.1 and put a center second in instead of an eccentric second. That's the difference between having, I think, somebody who is a real watchmaker in there. Not that the guys they have in there aren't real; they're just not this incredible talent. What do I think of Vacheron Constantin Twin Beat? I don't know of that. I really like uh, Vacheron Constantin a lot. I don't have one, and I have no plans on getting one, but I've got a lot of respect for Rolex for even though they had access to the silicon hairspring, they didn't use it. They kept what they kept in their watches was one made out of niobium and chromium plus some other things. But that was something I really respect a lot. Um, I don't know how the decision was made to go with silicon at Patek Philippe. And the funny thing about it, and this is me more than anybody else, I think, is whereas I don't really care for silicon hairsprings at all, I don't seem to mind it so much if they put them in there and the pallet forks or in their escapement because those aren't varied anyway. Whereas you take a transitional metal hairspring and you can do a lot of different things with it in terms of adjusting it. You can't do that with one made out of silicon. But I mean, you can adjust the free sprung balance, which is free sprung balance is a good thing too. I don't know. I think it's something though that we shouldn't just say, oh, okay, well this is what they're doing, and we'll sit back passively and accept whatever they send our way. And the thing that's the most disappointing, I hear people argue with a great deal of let's see, emotion, what is nothing more than the advertising copy that is put out by a watch company. It's just they have. I don't know if they even know what they're talking about or not. They may, which would make it even worse. But sometimes that's what you hear. Oh well, they have this or they have that. I think, I wonder if they know what that is or why. Um, on the other hand, some companies have. I think I'm thinking of what Moulay Glashütte with their grasshopper. Is it their grasshopper or woodpecker? No, it's their woodpecker. They got their woodpecker. Um, what is it? Regulator. Their woodpecker regulator. Like, oh boy. That's what that does though is that it's like a swan neck, and I don't know how they ended up with it, but it's an interesting kind of thing. The nice thing about a swan neck is that you can make these really fine adjustments, but with a hairspring that you can make it with. You can't have a swan neck with a silicone hairspring. I don't know. All mechanical watches, for that matter, Mr. Coffee has the time. Yeah, probably. Yeah, well, see, now this is the thing. Now we know I set my watch to my iPhone. All right. Um, I don't know if you guys know Mike Margolis or not. He's the U.S. rep for Chopek and Singer. He used to be the American rep to H. Moser too. But I was watching. I was over at Mike's one day, and he was getting some Chopeks ready for his customers, and he turned on his iPhone, and he has this really cool way of setting them so it sort of right down. Man, here we are. Here he has these really nice watches, and these, but that's what we all do, and that's perhaps the irony of it. And so, rather than, I don't know, what do you guys think? Uh, who do you think about spin drives for the Grand Seiko? Essentially, the Grand Seiko. This is the spring drive for the Grand Seiko is a brilliant piece of engineering for generating an electric charge using a mainspring. And instead of using a battery, they do it with a mainspring. And I think that is a brilliant piece of horology, but I don't want a quartz watch. It's the same thing with the Elegante by F.P. Journe. Here you have this brilliant, I mean, the regulator, the quartz regulator that F.P. Journe made is another really brilliant piece of horology. You have on the one hand, you've got the quartz and you got the battery, and then you have the mechanical on it. And what he did, he set it up so that when a person wasn't using their watch, it would sort of turn down. And by that I mean there's a little rotor that works something like like any rotor, and when it stops spinning, the battery sort of goes into a mode that it uses almost no power at all, except just a little to keep the correct time. And when you wake it up, what it does is that then it spins around the hands to the correct time. But I think they were talking about a battery. FP Journe is one lasting 50 years. Brilliant stuff, but I don't care for quartz watches. And the same thing I can say with the spring drive. And not only that, you get really accurate time because quartz is going to beat mechanical just about every time. I don't care what kind of constant force mechanism you put with them. Dominic, I think that our watches are wrist jewelry. It tells the time. I think you're right. But that's something. I mean, that's something worth, you know, that's something worth thinking about, though. Is that here? I got my watch. I don't think anybody, first of all, this particular watch is pretty large. I mean, you got this big, looks like you took it off of the town clock and put it on your wrist. You got this big old watch you're walking around. Uh, and oh yeah, by the way, it's white gold. I thought it was made out of tin or steel or something. I can't tell the difference, but it's probably true. I think now, if you put too much bling on a guy's watch, there is sort of like, it's like my Dandy Artie, which doesn't have any bling on it, but it's with a name like that. You got that. That's just another story. Hi, Mark. Let's see. I'm quietly fisting in the background. Okay. Hey, Rancher, I changed shirts so your eyes would quit watering. The Grand Seiko Dual Impulse escapement impresses me. Yeah, now I mean, you got a purely mechanical thing. You have Seiko has so many really good things that they don't get much credit for. Um, like the Seiko 5, for example. I love that watch. Um, what do you think of the coaxial escapement? I like it. I wish I had a watch with it. One of the things that I think about the only company other than Roger Smith, if you want to coaxial, you have to get an Omega, and I think the Omegas are now being part of the Swatch stable. Now all have, or most of them have the silicon hairsprings. So what are you going to do with that? Um, I I don't know that they are theoretically, I'll put it that way, theoretically, they're an improvement over the Swiss uh, escape. What are they called? The Swiss, not hammer, but Swiss lever. They're supposed to be an improvement over the Swiss lever. I don't know if that's been demonstrated or not, but that doesn't matter because I think it's a cool idea and I like the thinking that went into it. And you can see how how it works with less friction. And because of that, I think possibly in the long run they're better to have those. Dandy Artie, I know, isn't that a great name? First of all, Chaumet is a jeweler, and then with a name like Dandy, and then Dandy Artie, add all of that to it, and you got like, but those are cool watches. I love my Dandy Artie. Um, the the cases and the dials and everything about that watch, that thing is a great watch. I to me it is anyway. And I really enjoy having it. Now mine's got two Agan-E's gears in it, and that makes to me it makes a difference because you can look at that little Ferris wheel going around without skipping or jumping in perfect. My God, that thing is fun to. It's mesmerizing. And so that's another thing. I'm glad you brought that up, Rancher, because you can't. Some guys they seem to be a little unsure about their masculinity. So anything like dandy arty, I would be something that they would, that they may pucker up to. So we got to be careful about those things, and not to insult anybody. But um, I, if you pay attention. And that may be my problem. I pay more attention to the movement than any other part of the watch because there, almost without exception, there's a German company that uses the UWD 33.1 that has the ugliest watches ever. Now they they take this wonderful movement and they put it into this. God, I tell you, their unemployed cousin who needed a job did the design of these things. They're awful, but for the most part, I'll overlook anything for for a good movement, for a good horology and a watch. Stephen, how come I'm against it? Well, it's more like this, Stephen. Um, it, it there's and it sounds almost Luddite. Okay, it's sort of mechanical watch Luddite. If I want great accuracy and I don't want any problems with magnetisms, uh, I can look at my iPhone. My iPhone tells me all of the perfect time. I don't have any of that kind of problems. I got my FP Journe chronomet surveying just absolutely loves to get magnetized. And so I'm always shoving that thing in and out of the demagnetizer. It's just one of those watches that loves to do that. I've got another FP Journe right next to it. Doesn't bother it a bit, but it does that watch. Now, if that had a silicon hairspring or maybe just a silicon escapement in it, it wouldn't have that problem. And so your questions, what's bad about that? Nothing is bad about it. But I didn't get into this kind of watch collection to, it's the same thing with quartz. Well, we can make it a quartz if you like. Well, I don't want it. I want this. I want to take sort of a traditional kind of watchmaking. And one of the things I think that Roger Smith said, and I mentioned this morning, was that look, they've been using these materials. You can find a watch 200 or 300 years old using these transitional metals, and all of these other kinds of methods, and they still work. I got this old wind up uh, pocket watch. I wound it up and it worked fine. It worked fine until I took it apart and accidentally broke it. But I mean, I don't know whether, maybe that'll happen with, I got some old quartz watches that quit working, and some of them I can't get the case open because I think something happened. But so you know, it just sort of takes the fun out of it. Um, here's another funny kind of strange analogy. There's a rule in baseball that certain kinds of bats that you have cork in it or something like that, you're not supposed to use them because it's considered cheating. But they work fine. They really work great, just like silicon works to fend off magnetized watch part. But if you look at take Rolex, for example, they had a choice. They were one of the three companies, Swatch, Patek Philippe, and Rolex worked together to develop the silicon hairspring, or their money worked together to develop it. But yet Rolex decided, nah, we're going to go with our our hairspring that's made out of transitional metals, niobium and chromium. The H. Moser Straumann hairspring is niobium and titanium, and they don't seem to have magnetizing problems. I've got in both my H. Mosers, I have this. I've never had a problem with magnetization with either one of those watches. So it's sort of the price I pay for wanting that. Some of my watches have it. I think I have my 736 movements in my bum. I think it's a this watch right here. It gets magnetized. This is a Maurice Lacroix, and it's got the Jacquet 736 movement. And then run the thing through the demagnetizer a few times, and it's perfectly happy. But if it was full of silicon, I wouldn't have to do that. Well, that's not why I took up this kind of watch collection, so I could have one that was perfect that way. Silicon may become inescapable. LOL. 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 What's that for? Um, Cancer may become inescapable too. You never know. Would love to see a well done test of the strength of silicon versus steel spring. You don't want to twist one. You twist they're brittle. The thing about silicon is brittle. Here's the thing. I'm not arguing that it doesn't work. Silicon hairsprings work wonderfully well. They're not subject to magnetic fields. They are less subject to major changes in heat and cold. In other words, they're not going to get bigger and smaller because of that. What else? I'm trying to think. There was something else about them that was an advantage. There are lots of advantages. I got my iPhone if I want that. For mechanical watches, I like, even though who was it? George Daniels wasn't particularly happy about what he called curve regulators, and these are where you have a regulator on a watch with that you can do spring adjustments to, and rather the free sprung regulators. By the way, too, it's sort of funny. I see some watches with silicon hairsprings. They don't mention that, but they do brag about, well, we got a free sprung balance in our watches. Like, because the only way that you can adjust them is to go in with the weights. Okay, let's see. Dominic, looks like using silicon is a shortcut to accuracy, save adjustment time. Yeah, that's one way to look at it. And other people look at it as saying, well, this is an improvement. And I have heard that the another major uh, hairspring maker may have that option that's coming up. I think there's some kind of patent that's about to run out on them, and some things like that that will be a problem, you know, coming out. But if they go in that direction, that's it. But I don't see that. Rolex of all people, of all companies uh, that could have done it, didn't do it. And like I said, I've never been a great Rolex fan, not because anything's wrong with them. I just like other watches better, but rather but this is really sort of up my respect for them. On the other hand, uh, I there's one Omega, I think you can get. There's one of the um, what is it? One of their moon watches that was the original one that doesn't have silicon. Now that to me would be really interesting to have. I don't know about their one that they call the sapphire sandwich that you can see the back of. I'd love to have a watch like that I could see something that didn't have the silicon hairspring. Is that here's the thing, hey Donald, cast iron, huh? Uh, if you look at some of these companies like H. Moser, what's their biggest seller? It's not their watches. They'll make 2 or 3 watches a year, and 50,000 Straumann hairsprings. Why is that? That's because somebody else is using them. There's a company that a lot of you probably haven't heard of called Atocalpa. Now, it's one of the Sandoz Family Foundation uh, watch, part of their vertical hierarchy of their watch things that they own. That company has something like, over 100,000 hairsprings they're making a year. Who for? Well, there's sort of an agreement, like, we don't tell where we get our hairsprings from. These companies that say, oh, well, we're 100%, in house. No, they're not. They're not. They'll buy their gears from a gear making company, and they'll get this from here and get from there, and then put stuff together and stuff. I think apparently Rolex has their own forge. I found out something that they have another source for hands they may use on occasion. So what? I mean, my God, I tell you, I'd rather have a watch with a really good movement in it that was not in house, that was better than the in-house movement than anything in-house. So you're paying attention. You quit paying attention to what's important and looking at what sounds good. What happened? Gee, I've been blabbing on way too long. I'm sorry. We were supposed to stop at 4:30, but where are my caretakers? It's frying pan time. Okay, well, let me take a look at these last comments and then we'll wrap it up. Um, how long silicone works? It endures a long time. We don't know yet. It has. I got a feeling if you had a silicone, if you started your career and you got let's say you got a Patek Philippe, uh, a Calatrava, okay, and you just want to look good going to work. The time you retire, that and it's got a silicone hairspring. The time you retire, it's still working fine. That would be my guess. So I'm not. There's sort of like people will say, there's something wrong with it in terms of its inherent capacity. I don't think there is. I do think you get a watch in terms of you don't have certain problems that affect other hairsprings. But then you can't adjust it. You can't do things that are fun to do. I would rather have a watch. I'd rather get a Tissot uh, Petite Seconde with Heritage Petite Sunge with an ETA 6498-1 that runs at 18,000 VPH. I can take the back off. If that thing is running fast or slow, I can adjust it, and then I can put the backpack on and go off and show off my Tissot. Then I'd have one that is like, oh, you don't have to change anything. You don't have to change the oil. You don't have to change it. It just goes on forever. Okay, where's the fun in that? Oh, let's see. Hey, Truman. Truman's late. I can agree with silicon, but not accuracy. It's an art and science to make an accurate mechanical watch, same as complication of hand. Yeah, yeah, I agree. And like I said, they can put silicon in. Yeah, that's another thing too. We all don't have to want the same thing. Somebody said, "Well, I don't mind silicon," and I sort of like the idea that it's not going to get magnetized. Knock yourself out. It's not my decision. Getting a watch and what your taste in watches are up to you. Um, they said that laser disc would last 100 years, and in fact, they fall apart and delaminate. But well, I don't wish silicon hairsprings ill. I really don't. I just don't want one. It's sort of like, hey, how would you like a mohawk haircut? Well, there's nothing there left to be a mohawk in my case, but somebody because something there, y- I don't. You don't have to because it's popular or because it has certain advantages. You don't have to like it. You can like other things. All of my Teflon coating frying pans have stuck like hell. Tuna. Oh no. Hey, Steve. Hi, Hobby. Okay, guys. Listen, gotta go. I'm really late. And whatever, Clyde, wherever you are, you know, you yeah. Usually somebody steps in after half hour and helps out Clyde, who's sort of forgot. Take care.